Hello there. Welcome into a Tuesday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the new and improved Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics coming your way over the course of the next 3 hours, and I would love to get your opinion on them. The text and the phone line are the same for your convenience. 719-247-1313. That number, coincidentally, is also what you use in order to win things like Air Force Merrimack tickets, like Switchbacks Memphis tickets, like Ludacris at the Colorado State Fair tickets, all of which will be given away over the course of the program as well. Busy. Let's get to it. The Payton Purge continues in Denver. Now, yesterday, and it will probably stand to be the most surprising cut of all, was Tim Patrick. But we knew that yesterday that was going to happen. I have not seen that the Broncos have found a trade partner for Tim Patrick. But really, at the end of the day, what matters is that he's not a Denver Bronco anymore. Right? Would it change your mind about Tim Patrick if the Broncos were to get a 7th-round pick for him or a 6th-round pick? I don't think so. The fact of the matter is that Tim Patrick, who has been, before he got hurt, he's been a well-regarded Bronco the whole time, but a guy that you have come to know as a Broncos fan. Cortland Sutton took to social media earlier today to put out a bunch of pictures of the two of them, and with the caption of "together since day one" or something to that effect. So the parting of ways between the Denver Broncos and Tim Patrick is not nothing, and it does evoke some feelings. Today, probably the most surprising cut, while it doesn't rise to the level of Tim Patrick, is Jonas Griffith. Outside of that, I would say most of the cuts today were pretty expected. So my crack research staff, which is me, so take these numbers for what you will. I took the opening night depth chart of 2022 for the Denver Broncos. Coincidentally, they also went to Seattle for that season opener, if you recall. Since then, the Denver Broncos have turned over 68% of their roster. 36 of the 53 players that were on the roster for this opener 2 years ago are now no longer Denver Broncos players. And there's also 3 other guys, or 2 other guys, Turner Yell and Damari Mathis, who are currently on the IR, and we don't know how they're going to fit in once they come off the IR. They could be gone as well. But as of right now, we'll count them as a part of the Denver Broncos at the very least. 36 of the 53 players on the roster when the Denver Broncos played the Seattle Seahawks 2 years ago are now gone. Of the 22 starters between the offense and defense, Sean Payton has replaced 16 of them. That is 73%. And I think that's where you feel like this is significant, right? The 36 of the 53 guys that may have been on the team a couple of years ago as a third or fourth stringer probably don't really register to the casual fan. But when it's 16 of the 22 starters from that Seattle game that are gone, that gets your attention. But Tim Patrick, not one of those. But but Jonas Griffith was. So 16 of the 22 starters gone. That's good for 73%. So I wanted to know, is that high? Is that low? Is that pretty in tune? Because it feels like Sean Payton's taken a machete to this roster over the last couple of years, doesn't it? It feels like it. So I first went to a team like Kansas City. In fact, the team like Kansas City is actually Kansas City, just to get an idea. As almost a control in this experiment. If there is any team that has reasons to keep as many players on their roster as they can from the beginning of the 2022 NFL season, it would be Kansas City. Kansas City has turned over 40% of their roster and 45% of their starters since 2022. So obviously the Broncos far more. I expected that. Two other teams that I looked at, Arizona and Indianapolis. They were looking for a new head coach the same time the Broncos were. And they brought in Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon. And those two, I think Arizona also brought in a new general manager, by the way. So another fresh set of eyes, another guy that's not tied to anyone that was there before him. The Colts, 45% of the roster they've turned over, 36% of their starters. Arizona has turned over 74% of their roster, higher than the Denver Broncos, but 64% of their starters, which is lower than Denver. Now, a couple of takeaways that I have. If there's a continuum between, or a spectrum between Indianapolis and Arizona, it would make sense that the Broncos are closer to Arizona than they are Indianapolis. Indianapolis was not nearly the rebuild that Arizona and Denver were. So it makes sense that the Broncos numbers more mirror the Arizona Cardinals. But it is interesting to see that of those two teams, and especially juxtaposed to Arizona, the Broncos have turned over 73% of their starting 22 from the Seattle game 2 years ago. But therein lies what this is about. And the Tim Patrick cut yesterday, or the Tim Patrick news yesterday, kind of served as a tethering to reality type move. Everything that has happened through the preseason has all been, watch out for the Broncos. The Broncos are going to take the NFL by storm. Everything is confidence, hope, all that kind of stuff, sky high. And a team that's getting set to take the NFL by storm, to being the second best team in the AFC West, to competing for a playoff spot, as some think they will. Cutting Tim Patrick doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? There's no doubt Tim Patrick is one of the 5 or 6 best wide receivers the Denver Broncos have. In fact, he's second. And actually brings certain skill sets that Courtland Sutton doesn't. So cutting a player like that seems to run counter to the idea that the Denver Broncos are ready to win now. But what Tim Patrick was in the eyes of Sean Payton, and there was a general manager, maybe it was Gil Brandt, but it was somebody quite a few years ago, right? That called it something like a progress inhibitor or a progress blocker. And it sounds like a harsh term, but essentially what it means is Tim Patrick is getting in the way of somebody. Tim Patrick's career arc does not match with the arc of Sean Payton's build. And by getting Tim Patrick out of the way, it now opens up opportunity for the 3 young receivers. And I know Marvin Mims is not that same skill set. You wouldn't use him in the same way. But he's an option, right? And he's lesser of an option if Tim Patrick is on the field. And most notably, this goes to Devon Vele and Troy Franklin, who both did make the roster to nobody's surprise. Tim Patrick is a player that you take on if you are all in on this year. If you have high aspirations for this year, getting a Tim Patrick's a good idea. That's not where the Broncos are at right now. Now, I was going to gloss what Sean Payton is doing, Project 2025, but that has been taken. But that's essentially what this is. Sean Payton wants this team to be ready to seriously compete. Now, he thinks they're going to win more than people think they will. People think they win 5 or 6 games. Even if he gets to 7. Heck, let's go wild and say 8. That's still not a playoff team. That's not a team playing incredibly relevant games in December. That's a rebuilding team. Right? But he wants to make sure that the Denver Broncos are ready to compete on a serious level for the postseason next year. And he's doing a lot of things that should help that if everything goes according to plan. Bo Nix is going to have an entire rookie season under his belt. Not 4 games at the end of the season when things don't matter. Not dropping in on the bye week midway through the season. Right away, there's going to be a complete body of work for Bo Nix's rookie season. And quarterbacks typically show a big improvement from year 1 to year 2. As long as they have the right coaching, as long as they get close to, if not a full season under their belt, an actual body of work, not just a cameo. Right? Now you find a way to get Marvin Mims on the field a little bit more than you did. Right? You put out Vele, you put out Troy Franklin. You make them the options that Bo Nix goes to. You get rid of Samaje Perine. It's going to be heavy Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin, but Javonte Williams may not be a Denver Bronco next year. That's why you give Estime the carries and the opportunities to pass block that you would have given Samaje Perine to make sure they're ready to go. As much as the preseason made you feel like the Broncos are back on the right track, and I think you're right in believing that, this first stop, it's not a good stop, right? It's young mistakes. It's maybe some lopsided losses. But it's about getting these guys ready for next year when I think Sean Payton feels like he can really make the Broncos a factor in the AFC wildcard race, if nothing else. So perhaps the Tim Patrick move was necessary in terms of getting people recalibrated to understand now that the preseason is over and other teams are throwing out their best players every single week and they're scheming to beat the Denver Broncos, and they're going to try to do all the things that you do to disrupt a young quarterback and to make his life uncomfortable, that it's not going to look like it did in the preseason. But these are going to be valuable reps. And Sean Payton believes, through the grace of Sean Payton, there will be a couple of games this year where you look back just like last year and say, I didn't expect this young Broncos team to win that one or that one. But in terms of what many people think the Broncos are going to be this year, that's next year. And for those are the people that are taking the Tim Patrick news the toughest, because it's an acknowledgement by the Denver Broncos that it's not about this year. (719-247-1313). Take your thoughts on the final roster cutdowns. I'll give you some of those. Some very good news coming out of a day that mostly is bad throughout the league, right? You're seeing a lot of guys have their NFL dream ended, but there is one player that, if you're an Air Force fan, you will be delighted to hear made the final cut with the Denver Broncos. More on that in a little bit. Speaking of the Air Force Falcons, want to give them a similar treatment to what I gave CU. Troy Calhoun did answer every question that was posed to him today at his weekly press conference leading up to Merrimack. But what I want to do, best and worst case scenario this season for the Air Force Falcons, we'll do that this hour. Also, why this may be one of Troy Calhoun's favorite seasons ever in Colorado Springs. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Air Force football kicks off the 2024 season Saturday at Falcon Stadium. 1:30 kick against Merrimack. Check out the newly revamped Falcon Stadium and experience game day at Thin Air by going to aftickets.com. And there is a second way that you can go and be there, and that's by winning tickets from me. I have a 4-pack of tickets to Saturday's season opener against Merrimack that I would love to give to the 13th texter to text Falcons and their name to 719-247-1313. Good luck. Yesterday got a lot of people trying to get them Falcon tickets, so 719-247-1313. Speaking of, and with all due respect to Merrimack, this game on Saturday is about Air Force and about getting them ready for the rest of their season. And if there is any team in college football, at least in our neck of the woods, that could use a preseason, it would be Air Force. You're going to need to make sure that you have your rosters handy when you're at Falcon Stadium, because there are going to be a lot of guys that you've never seen before. And Merrimack will essentially be their preseason game. I don't know if Troy Calhoun would like more preseason games, but that's the one he gets, Merrimack, and then it gets real right after that. But I have a suspicion that this is a season that Troy Calhoun is going to very much enjoy, at least the lead up to the season. Earlier this afternoon, when I was up at his weekly press conference, Jesse Kurtz, one half of the outstanding Air Force football broadcast team, asked a question that was essentially the question on my mind, but he phrased it in a different way. My question is the question I posed to Brent Brigham yesterday. What do you know about this team? What are you sure of as this season gets going with so many new players that have played very little college football? Jesse Kurtz asked it in a different way, probably a better way because he's Jesse Kurtz. But here's Troy Calhoun's answer.
What are some of the characteristics and the things that impress you and you like most about this group?
You're saying our team?
Yeah.
I don't know if we're to that point. We've worked really, really hard. We've had as rugged of an August as we've ever had since we've been here. We wanted to go through some discovery, to see which guys really could practice day in, day out, and the other parts that are key elements too. Not only on the field, but in the weight room, the attention span during meetings, just because that's real once you get into the season too. So to answer your question, to be the work ethic.
Work ethic. That's all that Troy Calhoun really knows about his team. Knows for sure about his team is that they have the necessary work ethic. Outside of that, and coaches are coaches, right? In some instances, they're going to play a little bit coy. They're going to hold their cards close to the vest. But I think given the amount of turnover from one year to the next, I think there's a lot of truth to that. They recruited these guys. They have developed these guys. they've been running these guys through practice. They believe there's a certain amount of talent there, that this guy is ready to step up and take on this role and that. But you really don't know for sure. Even the coaches don't fully know for sure until they step out on the field. And the Merrimack game is not even going to be a great indicator of how good this Air Force team is or how these guys fit in the role. You see it a little bit. I think a lot of coaches may like this setup as long as the requisite talent is there, right? If they're seeing behind the scenes that this is a group that can compete in the Mountain West on a week in, week out basis and can give them a chance to be Army and Navy, the idea that you don't know how good this Air Force team is going to be, that I don't know how good this Air Force team is going to be. We believe certain things, but we don't know. I think this is one of the perfect situations going into a season for Troy Calhoun. No expectation, not that he shies away from expectation, but when there's expectation, when there's a knowledge base, right? You know how good Arion Worthman is, or how good Brad Roberts is, or how good the defense is. Oh, they have Bo Richter coming back. We know they're going to be able to create pressure on a quarterback. When you have those kind of things, that's where the questions that are asked, a lot of the attention is based around, can you guys win the Mountain West? Can you win a bowl game? Can you win this game, that game? People still wonder those things, but there's no expectation. There's no, because of this season. It's like Sean Payton with dumping out the puzzle pieces, right? Like Troy Calhoun is very much doing that. Dumping out all the puzzle pieces and putting it all back together again. Very few guys had spots sewn up for the next year. Right? Quarterback, new. Running backs, new. Wide receivers, new. Defensive line, except Payton Zadroik, new. Linebackers, new. Secondary is one of the only places where there are names that you're going to recognize on Saturday. And you heard him talk about how intense their practices have been. Their training camp, if you will, has been. And the fact that that was necessary in order to figure out who's ready to be on the field Saturday and beyond for the Air Force Falcons. For a coach that shrugs off and gives a stiff arm to anything, any big talk. Today it was asked about the college football playoff. Well, now the group of five gets a shot. So why not Air Force? Troy Calhoun doesn't want to talk about that. And he can do that easier when we, the public, don't really know anything about this team. We dig as much as we can in the media. We still got to see it on the field, just like Troy Calhoun and his coaching staff do. What this year is going to show off to some degree, and we'll see, will it be a great degree or only be a little bit, is the Air Force football program's ability to develop, right? It's the one inherent advantage other than the triple option that they have in college football. Yeah, an athlete every once in a while will transfer out after their sophomore year. That happens. But these guys and ladies who come into the Air Force Academy, pretty committed. They're going to stick around. And that gives Troy Calhoun and his staff a chance to create this assembly line of talent and be able to swap out an entire offensive line like they're doing this season. Swap out an entire linebacking core. For a guy that loves what being the head coach at Air Force is and the good stuff about it, not necessarily the stuff that puts them at a disadvantage with other teams in college football, I got to believe this is going to be a fun season for Troy Calhoun.
I don't think love, when you say love, I don't think that's strong enough. Absolutely. The drive, the love, the passion to do so, certainly from the football part of it, but it's beyond that too. I mean, just how much you want to immerse yourself in helping a guy maybe have a little better time management skills, to help them develop some self-discipline that helps them do better in school, or be a little sturdier in their squadron, or be a better football player. And hopefully those are attributes they carry with them long, long beyond football too.
Want to know why he's entering year 18 as the head coach of the Air Force Falcons? That love isn't a strong enough word to describe what he feels about developing talent, developing the young men that come into the Air Force Academy. And if these are a bunch of guys that need developing, that they've been developing, that are all going to step in, they're all going to have to earn it on a week in, week out basis. We've been talking about John Boucher, his spot, legitimately, not like Bo Nix doesn't get a tour exemption like Sean Payton was talking about the other day. Like, legitimately, John Boucher may not be the quarterback of the Air Force Falcons the entirety of the season. Troy Calhoun, for the first time in at least a few years, and maybe to a greater degree than he has had in a very long time, has a team with not a lot of continuity, without a lot of expectation, and he can mold them to focus on what he wants them to focus on, right? Which is not the college football playoff, which is not winning the Mountain West, which is not beating Army and Navy, not right now. It's about Merrimack. These are all guys. Brent Briggerman asked this question earlier today. It's a great question. He asked it to one of the players that came in. Right? With Air Force going along the way they are, right? 9 wins, 10 wins, bowl game, beating Power 5 team, all that kind of stuff. Games against Robert Morris, Merrimack, they're what they are, right? And you can't make them more than that. But on Saturday, Troy Calhoun's going to have 22, 33, however many guys play. The vast majority of them will be stepping onto a college football field in a game for the first time ever. They're not overlooking Merrimack. They have been waiting their entire lives for the opportunity they're getting on Saturday. That's the kind of focus that Troy Calhoun wants, and that's the kind of focus that he's going to get from this team that has been grinding for a year, 2 years, 3 years to finally get a chance to step onto the field at Falcon Stadium. I think he likes the prospect of what this team is. Now, doesn't mean it's going to result in the same record that it's been resulting in for Air Force. That's where the best and worst case scenario comes into play. I have the best and the worst case scenario for this year's version of the Air Force Falcons, and I'll bring that to you next on Extra Sports 1300. The Colorado State Fair is well underway in Pueblo. It'll run through September 2nd with free attractions, a carnival, great concert lineup, many of those starting up here in the next day or two. The Spinners and the Commodores, Ludacris, Trace Atkins, Goo Goo Dolls, and more. It's fun for the whole family. Plan your visit at coloradostatefair.com. So yesterday I did the best and worst case scenario for the Colorado Buffaloes. And to me, it is a pretty wide range that they fall into. Right? I thought best case scenario, this is a team that late in the season is competing for a shot in the Big 12 game. And worst case, they don't win a single additional game than they won last year. Right? That's a pretty wide spectrum there. As I go through the same exercise for Air Force, I think there has been too much that you have seen through the years with this Air Force program. And Brent Brigham yesterday, when he joined me on the show, alluded to it. Right? This whole brand new offensive line thing, they did go through this just a couple years ago. Wasn't that long ago. They've done this before. That's what's remarkable about this last half a decade, is that there have been years where a position group or two needs to be almost completely turned over, and Air Force is able to do it. Now, I can't recall a year where they're doing it to the degree they're doing it this year. But given the track record, given what I have heard and seen so far, I just think that the floor is bowl eligibility. Right? And I try to take injuries out of this. Yes, if their entire backfield gets hurt, then yeah, things could go quite awry. I assume health and just decide what it could look like from there. So if I'm starting with the worst case scenario for Air Force, I feel like it ends up but with 6 wins. But what it looks like is that John Boucher is not the runner that he needs to be. I know the dude could throw it, but that's not job one. It's not job two, and sometimes it's not even job three. So if John Boucher isn't the runner that he's supposed to be, if this offensive line, while they have been developed over the last few years, they're just not what that last group was. That last iteration of the Diesel. They're not quite that. And now you have a quarterback that maybe doesn't run the ball as well as some of his predecessors. And ultimately, the turnover on this roster is just too much. Just too much. Too many holes on this team. And the good teams in the Mount West expose that. Right? So you're looking at Merrimack, best or worst case scenario, they win. I would be flabbergasted if Air Force got on Saturday against Merrimack. And then I think, I would feel good about them beating San Jose State, even in kind of a worst case scenario perspective. But then I look, you go to Baylor, you go to Wyoming. War Memorial has been a house of horrors for this team. And Baylor is far removed, much like Air Force is, from the two teams that matched up in that bowl game a couple of years ago. A lot of different personnel. And a coach that is not in great standing with the university and would certainly identify that game as one he cannot afford to lose if he wants to remain employed at Baylor. So they start off 2-2, they start off 2-2. They beat Navy and they beat New Mexico. But then CSU gets them at home at Air Force. Then they lose at West Point, right? They don't win the CIC trophy. That would be bad. Fresno State is one of the few teams that was ranked above them in the Mount West preseason poll. I know that they had to kind of last minute throw in a new head coach, but that Fresno State team's really good. And then you play an Oregon State team that was just a Pac-12 team a year ago. And yes, they've lost a lot. But I don't know what's being said on the recruiting trail. Oregon State's going to have some dudes. They're going to have some dudes. And then you have 2 road games at Nevada, at San Diego State. So if things aren't going well, if the line's not quite as good, if John Boucher's not quite the runner, if the turnover in the roster is just too much, I think maybe worst case scenario is Air Force ekes to 6 wins, does not win the CIC trophy, does not beat the other Colorado school on their schedule, continues their struggles at Laramie. All of these benchmark games, they lose. I still think there's enough wiggle room for them to get to 6 wins. But when a program has put up 9 wins, 10 wins, gone to significant bowl games, playing Power 5 teams, they're not even going to get to play James Madison. Like they wouldn't even get to play another elite group of 5 team. So that's the worst case scenario for Air Force. Here's your best case scenario. Not only is John Boucher the runner that Air Force needs him to be, that added dynamic of being able to throw the football, Mike Thiessen employs it perfectly. Defense creeps up, they hit him over the top. They play honest, they run the ball down their throat. Mike Thiessen, game to game, putting on a clinic when it comes to play calling, being able to utilize John Boucher's throwing ability. The offensive line, this iteration of the Diesel, coached by Steve Lebowski, is maybe not quite as good, but they're still very good because they've been developed in this program for multiple years. The defense, with where they do have continuity in the secondary, make it difficult to air it out against them. And then you have Payton Zadroik, who's wreaking havoc on the defensive line. That's what it looks like. And you beat Merrimack and you beat San Jose State. And I think you split with Baylor and Wyoming. And I'd be interested, if you're a Falcon fan, which one would you rather them win? I mean, I think it'd be Wyoming, but there's something about this program recently when it comes to Power 5 teams that you may be like, kind of like them to beat Baylor. But if I told you they win one of those 2 games, you could pick which one. I would say Wyoming. They're better than Wyoming. Air Force is a better team than Wyoming. They should beat them even in Laramie. So they exercise those demons. Maybe they lose to a desperate Baylor team, but they beat Wyoming. They're 3-1. Then they beat Navy. They're 4-1. They beat New Mexico. There's 5 wins. They beat CSU at home. That's 6 wins. They go to West Point and they punch the Black Knights in the mouth, much the same way that they did to Air Force 1 year ago at Empower Field, and they bring home the CIC trophy. Then they split the 2 home games, 2 very difficult home games against Fresno State and Oregon State. And then they go to Nevada, who is near the bottom of the Mount West, at least projected to be near the bottom, and a down San Diego State team. The continuity that Air Force has in its coaching staff and the way they do things, the offense they run, the defense they run, that continuity carries the day over the lack of roster continuity. And going against a bevy of first-year head coaches. And many of those first-year head coaches are first-time head coaches. Air Force outcoaches a couple of the teams on their schedule. Best case scenario for Air Force, obviously bringing home the CIC trophy. Exercising the demons in Laramie. Beating in-state rival CSU. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 wins. 9 wins could get them into the Mount West title game. While there's reason to be skeptical on a healthy level because you haven't seen these guys, their schedule this year, no UNLV, no Boise State. It is actually the perfect schedule to get in a season where you're going through so much transition with your roster. It's not as difficult as last year's was. So worst case scenario, Air Force is going to a bowl game only just with 6 wins. Best case scenario, we're talking 9 wins and maybe getting into the Mountain West title game. Where I settle in, I think this is probably just a notch below that best case scenario. Seven, 8 wins. And still playing games that matter in the Mountain West late in the football season, knocking off some of their regional rivals, both of them. Army. I think Air Force could bring the CIC trophy back this year. I do. And if they can win the CIC trophy and be a factor in the Mount West with how young this team is, how inexperienced this team is, might say it would be one of Troy Calhoun's finest performances. Where do you think Air Force is going to be? Best case scenario, 9 wins. Worst case scenario, 6 wins. Where do you see the Falcons this upcoming season? 719-247-1313. Coming up next, the final 53-man roster for the Denver Broncos is out. Did anyone make a play for Zach Wilson? Tell you next on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in Drive Time Sports on this fine Tuesday in Colorado Springs. A reminder, you can watch the show live on a daily basis via our social media platforms. That being Facebook, X, Instagram, and YouTube. The handle all the same at XTRA Sports 1300. This hour, I'll be giving away tickets to either Ludacris or the Switchbacks. I haven't quite decided yet. I have more Air Force tickets I want to give away today. So keep the text and phone line handy, 719-247-1313. And who knows, you may just feel compelled enough to text or call in your thoughts on the topics I am discussing today. Just left off giving the best and worst case scenarios for Air Force. Worst case scenario, this team does not win the CIC trophy and they eke their way into a bowl game at 6 wins. Best case scenario, they bring the CIC trophy home and they stack up 9 wins. They compete for a spot in the Mount West Championship. They exercise some demons in Laramie, and they take down CSU. Now, when I say that their best and worst case scenario, there's some realistic possibility of both. Right? I'm not going to go, CU's going to not win a single game, or CSU's not going to win a single game, or Air Force, like everybody gets hurt, and I'm not doing that. The worst possible scenario that I could see versus the best possible scenario that I could see. So I very much think that Air Force can bring I think they will bring the CIC trophy back. I do think they're going to be in the conversation of the Mount West and getting potentially into the championship game. I don't think they'll get there. But much like CU in the Big 12, I think both of them, if I told you right now, they would both be in the conversation with a couple weeks to go. I think you would say that's a pretty wildly successful season for both the Buffaloes and the Falcons. Your thoughts at 719-247-1313. I asked the question earlier because I'm looking at this stretch with Baylor and Wyoming, and I believe there is a bye week between it. So there is. So extra time to prepare for Wyoming. I think that's the one that they get. I think Baylor right now is a little bit of a mess, but at home, playing in a young Air Force team with a lot on the line for Baylor this season needs to go well for them. I think Baylor wins that game. But then you go into the bye week and put all your focus onto Wyoming. And if there's any year where they can exercise those demons, it's got to be this year. Got to be. Which would you rather? The Power 5 team or Wyoming? From the 719. I'd love to see the Falcons beat Baylor, but if we have a choice and can only have one, they got a big Wyoming. Got to get in the conference. And not that Oregon State right now is a Power 5 team, and their roster is not going to look necessarily like a Power 5 team. They're going to be in some kind of weird limbo where there are a couple of guys that are like, oh, dang, that dude's a player. And then there are going to be other guys that you're like, it's pretty much on par with what you see in the group of 5. That's the weird purgatory that Oregon State and Washington State are in right now. But they are still a part of the Pac conference. So maybe you could double dip a little bit there and say, I'll take the Wyoming game and then take a pseudo Power 5 win later in the year against Oregon State. Or how about in a bowl game? Best, worst, your expectations for the Air Force Falcons from the 719. I'd say the Falcons will win 8 and bring the CIC trophy home. You and me. Simpatico. I think that's what we're looking at. I think that's what it will be. That would be my prediction for that. Well, I'll take yours. And if you didn't get in yesterday, your thoughts on how CU is going to fare in the second year under Coach Prime, I'll take those as well. And if you want to get a jump on the best, worst case scenario for the CSU Rams, I take them as well at 719-247-1313. Now, to this Payton Purge everyone has been talking about, namely me. The official finalized 53-man roster has been put out by the Denver Broncos. Not going to read every name on this list because, quite frankly, you don't care. 3 quarterbacks are on the roster. Zach Wilson, Jared Stidham, and Bo Nix. Did you notice, little sidebar here, did you notice that the Packers made a trade for a backup quarterback last night? Why wouldn't they want Zach Wilson? Sean Payton's done this before, right? Teddy Bridgewater, Jameis Winston, Zach Wilson's his latest. You got to get this guy. Except look at what Teddy Bridgewater did in Carolina. Tell me what Jameis Winston has legitimately done without Sean Payton. I'm not saying he hasn't made Zach Wilson look much better than I thought Zach Wilson would look, because he did. Kudos to him for that. But there's got to be a belief in some parts of the league. And part of, I think, I think it's important to be real with who you are. Sean Payton is an elite play caller. Right? And that's part of the reason these quarterbacks that you think are not any good can look very good, especially when they go up against vanilla defenses full of second and third stringers. The idea that the Broncos were going to be able to find a trade partner for Zach Wilson in retrospect is a little bit laughable. Because, one, he didn't show it on a stage that teams would take notice necessarily and be like, whoa, we took notice. But teams can assess what they see and be like, okay, Green Bay wasn't playing. How many guys? Arizona wasn't playing. How many guys? Sean Payton, with respect to him, great play caller. But I think that also lasts into the season. If Taysom Hill, Teddy Bridgewater, and Jameis Winston are more what you look at than Drew Brees, who is a very good quarterback before he got hurt. You look at these past orphan dogs that Sean Payton has. What have any of them accomplished once Sean Payton left New Orleans, or once they left New Orleans? Teddy Bridgewater got overpaid by Carolina. Carolina wanted to move on from him. Denver got duped. And Broncos didn't really do anything with Teddy Bridgewater, did they? Dennis Allen is talking about using Taysom Hill as, what did he say, like a safety or something, a linebacker. So there has to be some acknowledgement that Sean Payton is really good at calling plays and really good at scheming things up to make a quarterback feel comfortable and to have success, that maybe if you're being real about things, if you're a different team, you would be like, you know what? We probably don't have Sean Payton. I'm probably not Sean Payton. Because the recent track record is Sean Payton can make these guys look good. Carolina, Denver, New Orleans with Dennis Allen, not really. And by the way, Zach Wilson cost $2.5 million. Malik Willis, who the Packers brought in to be the backup to Jordan Love, costs, I think, less than half that. Now, $2.5 million is not a lot for a guy that you think can be that one snap away. Right? It's not a ton of money, but money is a bit of a factor. But the Green Bay Packers choosing to trade for Malik Willis over Zach Wilson, maybe that should set in some reality about what you saw from Zach Wilson in this preseason. I digress. So 3 quarterbacks. Blake Watson makes the cut as the 4th running back behind Javonte Williams, Audric Estime, and Jaleel McLaughlin. So another young player. Sean Payton talked about the young players that not just the guys they drafted, but the guys they brought in as undrafted free agents. Blake Watson will be the 4th Broncos running back for what it's worth. It is a 3-headed backfield for the Denver Broncos once the season begins. Here's where things get interesting. A lot of people thought that with Tim Patrick moving on, and he did get cut, that maybe it would be a Lil Jordan Humphrey, a Charles Johnson, Brandon Johnson, Charles is his dad. One of those guys would make the roster. Nope. Reynolds, Sutton, Franklin, Mims, Vele. 5 wide receivers. I thought they would take 6. Perhaps that might be a position that Sean Payton is looking to add once all these cutdowns are made, which they already are. They were 2 hours ago. But maybe Sean Payton getting George to work the phones a little bit to try and get another guy. But even as I say that, they take 4 tight ends. Atkins, this is what I was thinking this when I wrote out my 53-man roster prediction. I thought they'd take Nate Atkins and make him their fullback. I thought they were giving him a lot of work there. I thought they could take Nate Atkins and essentially give them an emergency tight end and a fullback in one player, right? Positional versatility. If you can get it, it's great. But as I say about the wide receiver room, the reason Tim Patrick's gone is because he's blocking Troy Franklin and Devon Vele. So why would he want to bring in somebody that would block them unless it's somebody very significant that he thinks moves the needle for them? So they may stick with 5. We'll see. Or take a flyer on somebody who got cut that would not be above these other guys on the depth chart. And then offensive line, looks like Forsyth, Wattenberg, I knew. Paulzewski, I thought he would make it as kind of their swing tackle. McGlinchey, Bowles, obviously. Powers, obviously. Meinertz, obviously. Then they take Frank Crum, who I didn't think played very well on Sunday, and Matt Pert. So the offensive line group, maybe an extra offensive lineman as opposed to the 6 wide receivers when it comes to the offense. But all in all, given that you knew that both Samaje Perine and Tim Patrick were on the way out, kind of tracks with what you thought the offensive part of the roster would be. Now, for the defense, I'll take a break, bring that to you on the other side, but why the defense may be where the good stories are, whereas most of the stuff around the offense with Tim Patrick in particular may not be feeling as good after roster cut down day, but there are a few really good stories about guys who earn their way onto the Broncos defense. I'll give those to you next on Extra Sports 1300. Join Colorado Springs Switchbacks FC for Witches and Wizards Night tomorrow night at 6 p.m. The first fans through the gates will get a goblet. Feels like the right night to give away a goblet. If it was like a week ago or this past Saturday, might be a little bit weird to give away a goblet. Seems like it fits in this week. Then after the Switchbacks take on Memphis, experience a magical fireworks display. Get your tickets now at switchbacksfc.com or heck, give them from me right now. 13th texter to text Switchbacks and your name to 719-247 1313 will get a 4-pack of tickets to see the Switchbacks take on Memphis tomorrow night at Widener Field. So went through the Broncos offense as they have finalized the 53. There is a note I want to bring into it. Talked about Nate Atkins maybe serving as a fullback for the Denver Broncos and the Broncos only having 5 wide receivers. Mike Kliss and others have pointed out that Michael Burton, the incumbent fullback, and Lil Jordan Humphrey are not subject to waivers. So they can get them through to the practice squad if those 2 players accept that. That's the way I read it, is that Burton or Humphrey can be like, no, but I'm not going to the practice squad. But the idea is that this is about protecting as many players as they can that they want to keep on the roster. Let everybody fill up their rosters. And then maybe once the season begins, makes some moves, especially at offensive line. Maybe move a Crum or a Pert down and see if you can't sneak him through to the practice squad to bring up a Burton or a Humphrey. So the Bronco tenure of both Michael Burton and Lil Jordan Humphrey may not be over yet. But that is all, insiders and things like that. So we'll wait and see on that. And the offense, I think, because of the Tim Patrick news yesterday, there's a little damper on that. Like, yeah, you expected there to be 3 quarterbacks and you're excited about Bo Nix, but Broncos fans, I think, were a little bit bummed that Tim Patrick was cut. And that's kind of what today's about, right? Today's supposed to be a bummer. Today's not supposed to be exciting and joyful. Guys are losing their jobs, the dreams that they worked for their whole life. So this is not a fun day. It doesn't have to make you feel like your whole view of the Denver Broncos is incorrect, but just, it's not a fun day. It's not a fun day. But when you look at the Broncos defense, there are a couple of stories that I think are very positive. First and foremost, Jordan Jackson, former Air Force Falcon, has made the Broncos 53-man roster. Now with Burton and, we don't know what's going to happen moving forward, but Jordan Jackson has made the final cut of the 53-man Broncos roster. And today he has been deemed a guy worthy of an NFL roster, which is what I was saying yesterday. The team got team release Matt Henningsen essentially, and that cleared the spot for Jordan Jackson. This guy deserves to be on an NFL roster. His former head coach, Troy Calhoun, today talked about the improvement that Jackson has made even after leaving the Air Force Academy.
JJ was incredible. And, in fairness to JJ, he hasn't spent an extensive amount of time. And there is a 3 technique and that kind of over front where you just, he's quicker, he's stronger, so we'll see what happens there too.
And of course, the news didn't break while Troy Calhoun was speaking with us earlier this afternoon, but Jordan Jackson has made the Broncos' initial 53-man roster. And if my sleuthing was adequate, I think he is the only Falcon that made an NFL 53-man roster. See what I think. Bo Richter didn't make the Minnesota Vikings. I may be forgetting somebody, but that's great. It's great for Jordan Jackson, and I'll equate it to another guy who I think is a great story that got rewarded today, and it's Keidron Smith. I could not tell you who Keidron Smith was before the Broncos preseason. I could tell you who Keidron Smith is now. And if you're going to be a team that puts stock into the preseason, that cares about the preseason, then you're going to ask your guys to buy in to that effect. You need to buy into them the same way. Meaning, if a player like Jordan Jackson is an absolute menace on Sunday, or if Keidron Smith gets 3 turnovers and nearly forces a 4th in 3 games, you should reward those guys. You set up an environment where you say, this matters. We want you to play as hard as you can. Obviously, guys like Jordan Jackson and Keidron Smith are going to play their hearts out because they're not assured anything. But if the philosophy from Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos is, hey, this matters, we treat it like real games. Okay, well, then by that logic, Jordan Jackson and Keidron Smith have balled out in real football games. That should matter. That should at least break a tie. And I think with Jackson and Henningsen, it probably did. But that's where the good stories are. And let's not forget Lavelle Bailey. What's been Sean Payton's big mantra? Mostly applied to Bo Nix, but applied to everybody on the roster to a lesser degree. Don't make the same mistake twice. Well, Lavelle Bailey made mistakes twice, leading up to a play where he then intercepted and took it to the house. So maybe Sean Payton would have liked one fewer mistake, but Lavelle Bailey making this initial 53-man roster is, hey, you do the things that we're asking you to do. You come up big in these games that many people don't care about, but we do. You're going to be rewarded for it. Lavelle Bailey keeps the streak alive, by the by, of undrafted rookies making the roster. Jordan Jackson, Keidron Smith also being on the roster. The defense, I think, is where those good stories are. The offense, because of losing Tim Patrick, is maybe where it's not as fun. The stories aren't quite as good. But outside of that, pretty chalky. Pretty chalky. Bailey got a roster spot instead of Jonas Griffith, but then Stranad, Singleton, Barton, all on there. Tremon Smith, I talked about him a week ago as a special teams guy So he was going to make the roster. Surtain, Moss, McMillan, Abrams, Drain, Levi Wallace in the cornerback room, Cooper, Browning, Benito, Ellis, that outside linebacker, Franklin Myers, Allen, Uruzarike, Roach, Jones, and Jordan Jackson on the defensive line, and then Locke, Jones, Key, Skinner, and Keidron Smith. Arguably the story, not named Bo Nix, of Broncos training camp makes the roster. And we knew this yesterday, but Riley Dixon wins the punter battle over Trenton Gill. Will Lutz remains, and Mitchell Fraboni. It's going to be the long snapper. So there you go. The Broncos 53. Do what you do with it, and we'll continue to do what we do with it as we move along. Just about halfway home on this Tuesday edition of Drive Time Sports. Feels like I should give away more tickets to things coming up next. Yeah, I'm going to. That's next. I'm in a very Air Force mood today. Went over best and worst case scenarios for the Falcons this upcoming season. You heard a lot from Troy Calhoun earlier. Bring back some of that audio later. So how about I just give away another 4-pack of tickets to the opener against Merrimack on Saturday? Feels right, doesn't it? Text Falcons in your name to 719-247-1313. 13 texter will get a 4-pack of tickets to see Air Force take on Merrimack Saturday afternoon at the newly revamped Falcon Stadium. And I'm telling you, this thing looks awesome. Awesome. And you'll notice some different food items and yeah, check it out. Well, and what better time to check it out than game one? So, yeah. Congratulations, by the way, to Jordan, winner of the 4-pack of tickets to see the Switchbacks take on Memphis tomorrow night. So a couple of reports coming in here. Well, a report and a quote. This from Andrew Mason of Denver Sports with George Payton on cutting Tim Patrick. Quote, "We really like our depth at receiver, and we like the depth at other positions on our team. Special teams come into play, obviously. It wasn't just one thing. Tim did a lot of things well, and we're going to miss him." Money? Did you mention money? Could Tim Patrick's ouster from the roster have something to do with finances, Sean Payton?
No, we've got enough money to. No.
Okay. Just asking. So that's look, the two, I won't say elephants in the room, but the two glaring omissions, finances certainly play a role. I do think that the Broncos, it wasn't at the top of their list. It might not have even been in the top 3, but they look at it and they say, hey, we can save about $7 million. That comes into play, but it's fine. That can be far down the list. But what it is mostly about Tim Patrick is that he is blocking Devon Vele or Troy Franklin, whoever you like better. He's blocking them. And this is about 2 years. This is about a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Cortland Sutton may not even be a part of the Denver Broncos that far into the future. Tim Patrick coming off of 2 knee surgeries, veteran guy, more expensive, all this kind of stuff goes into it. It's not one thing that gets these guys on the roster or off the roster. But I think that's ultimately what it is. Right? You have Troy Franklin, who you drafted purposefully because you really liked him. You need to get him looks. And then you have Devon Vele, who has been one of the pleasant surprises of camp. There you go. Okay, well, we got both of these guys. Tim Patrick kind of getting in the way of that. Report from Cecil Lammy, also of Denver Sports, coincidentally, reporting that Tim Patrick is going to sign with the Lions. So essentially, if that were to come to fruition, essentially the Broncos traded. The Lions traded Josh Reynolds for future considerations and got back Tim Patrick. I mean, that was the swap. If Tim Patrick ends up with the Lions, Josh Reynolds on the Broncos. Take your thoughts at 719-247-1313. Looking over this 53-man roster, and the Broncos have done a nice job of making very colorful. I'll show you if you're watching the live stream, see? Very colorful. very tasteful. I don't know how demure it is. And I'm looking at these position groups. And I'm saying, what position group do I like the best? You know, what's the strength of this Broncos team going into 2024? And on the offensive side, I think it's the line. I do. And I know that they're going to have a new center in Luke Wattenberg. But McGlinchey, Meinerz, Powers, Bowles, it's a good group. And I'm glad that this preseason has shown that it was not all their fault on why Russell Wilson took so many sacks last year. I think it's the offensive line, and I think it's going to be kind of the identity of this team. I mean, yeah, Bo Nix is probably now the face of the team. He's going to be the most notable player on this football team. But the offensive line is right there as the most important thing in Sean Payton's mind, right? Getting that right. Spared no expense. All these other cost-cutting measures, all these other higher-priced guys being shown out. Josie Jewell, Justin Simmons, Tim Patrick. Yeah, they let Lloyd Cushenberry walk, but a lot of these guys were part of that Broncos offensive line. And I think you're going to see the Broncos run the football a lot. So, young quarterback, good run game, a lot of question marks when it comes to the guys catching passes. Think that all traces back to the offensive line, and it does for every team. Right, but let's be real. Not every offensive line in the NFL gets the credit that they deserve. I think because of continuity, and because of, just how important they're going to be with a rookie quarterback. I feel like it's the offensive line. They have depth there, but they also have a good group to start with. And I can't say that about the tight end position. In fact, that's would be my least favorite position group on the Broncos offense. I don't like this tight end group. I don't see the appeal with Lucas Kroll. Everyone keeps trying to make Greg Dulcich happen. I'll believe it when I see it. Adam Troutman, while Sean Payton really likes him, he's not, let's be honest. When you're talking about tight ends, you would like to think that you have the potential of having a Travis Kelce or a Darren Waller. This group doesn't have that potential. Wide receiver has questions. You have Reynolds on a new team. You have Cortland Sutton. And then you have 3 young players. 2 rookies and a guy in Mims who we didn't see a lot last year. The running back room I like, but Estime's being elevated to a big role. Javonte Williams, I think he'll be better off the ACL, year 2 off the ACL. But you're going to want to see it. You're going to want to see how Sean Payton splits it in terms of the reps and everything. And then the quarterback room, I like what I see from Bo Nix. I think Jared Stidham is a good backup, and don't talk to me about Zach Wilson and what he is or you think he is. I think it's the offensive line. So favorite position group on the Broncos offense would be the line. My least favorite would be the tight end position. On the defense, I mean, forgive me, but this wouldn't be an inventive answer, but I like the defensive line. I do. They're not as high profile as the outside linebackers, and I like the linebacker group. I do. I don't think there's a guy there. I think you have 4 solid, interchangeable, decent pass rushers. And I think to be a real factor, you need one of those guys to kind of rise above that level. And we'll see. They're all going to get their opportunities. I think it's the defensive line. Again, depth, importance. DJ Jones. You bring in Malcolm Roach. You have Zach Allen. John Franklin Myers. I haven't talked about him hardly at all this training camp. Like, that was not an insignificant acquisition. And the only reason John Franklin Myers was available is because the Jets thought that Hassan Reddick was going to sign with them. So I like the Broncos in the trenches. That's what I like. And I kind of feel like in the trenches, I like them the best. And as you build your way out, that's where I start to like the Broncos less and less. Pat Surtain obviously being a clear outlier. Everybody likes Pat Surtain. Everybody acknowledges how good Pat Surtain is. But this is Sean Payton's vision. Build things up in the trenches. That's where he's done the most work. Franklin Myers, Roach, Allen, McGlinchey, Powers on the offensive side, extending Quinn Meinerz. I think my least favorite group on the Broncos defense is the safeties. I love the story of Keidron Smith. I thought J.L. Skinner popped at times in the preseason. We have yet to see Brandon Jones. He's the replacement for Justin Simmons. Have yet to see him. You like P.J. Locke. Still learning about Devon Key. Now, the good news is, and it fits with my assertion that the further away you go from the trenches, the less I like the Denver Broncos roster. That's the furthest away from the trenches, right? The safeties. And that's what Sean Payne judged. Like, I like Justin Simmons, but he's an older player and it's safety. It doesn't matter near as much. So having turned over, I think Chris Thomason tweeted out 34 of the 53 guys currently on the Broncos roster, Sean Payton brought in. With the help of George Payton, of course, but 34 of the 53. Where are a lot of them? Closer to the trenches. Quarterback, under center, offensive line, defensive line. Heck, even running back. Javonte Williams is the only holdover from 2 years ago. Special teams wise, I think Mitchell Fraboni. I think he's the long snapper position is probably the strongest in the special teams group. Take your thoughts on the Broncos 53-man. What position group do you like the best? Which do you like the least as you're seeing this? 53-man roster, and we'll see if the Broncos are going shopping and if this will change in the next couple of days. 719-247-1313. On the other side of this break, we'll hit the 3 stories that are driving the show, take your thoughts on those stories, and give away tickets to see Ludacris at the Colorado State Fair. Much to do next hour. Stick around here on Extra Sports 1300. Hello there. Welcome in Drive Time Sports on this Tuesday. Ryan Kaufman with you. It is my pleasure to have you, whether it's on your radio, online, or through the Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health and well-being for all, or if you're watching the show live on our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300. Our latest winner for the Air Force tickets is Michael. So congratulations to Michael. No more Air Force tickets today. Today, no more. Wink, wink. Tomorrow, tune in. But I do have ludicrous tickets to give away this hour. The number to potentially win is the same number that you use in order to chastise me on a daily basis. It is 719-247-1313. Let's get things rolling this hour with the three stories that are driving the show. All right, story number one. The Broncos, as well as every other NFL team, per the agreed upon rules of the game, have cut their rosters down to 53 players. Given we knew about Samaje Perine and Tim Patrick yesterday, I would say the most surprising but not totally shocking roster cut today was Jonas Griffith. And he was chosen. Lavelle Bailey beat him out. That's what I'm trying to say. Lavelle Bailey beat out Jonas Griffith. But outside of that, pretty chalky. Some really good news is that Jordan Jackson, formerly of the Air Force Falcons, has made the initial 53-man roster. So has one of the stories at camp, not named Bo Nix, and Keidron Smith. He makes the roster. And those two guys deserve to be rewarded, as same with Lavelle Bailey. The Broncos care about preseason games. They treat them as much as they can like regular season games. And the players that ball out in those games and run passes back 97 yards for touchdowns and have multiple sacks and have 3 forced turnovers in 3 preseason games deserve to be rewarded as such. So Keidron Smith, Jordan Jackson, Lavelle Bailey, those are the 3 guys that earn their way on with the way they played in the preseason. A lot of these guys had to prove it in the preseason, but the guys, it's kind of like the NCAA tournament. I feel like Keidron Smith, Jordan Jackson, and Lavelle Bailey were maybe on the list of the first 3 out or the last 3 in, but they earned their way on. So, all told, mentioned this earlier, 34 of the 53 players on the Broncos roster were brought into Denver after Sean Payton took over as head coach. That is a significant amount of roster turnover. I actually had the number because I think what Chris Thomason, who I saw that number, I think his number is a little bit more conservative than mine. The reason being is because Well, no, ours tracked the same. 53, 20. Yeah. I have 36. Was he have 34? Okay. I went from just the opening night depth chart of year 2022. So not all of those guys, there's a period of time where a guy was brought in when Sean Payton wasn't here. But since 2022, the Broncos have turned over 68% of the roster and 73% of their starters are gone. From what Nathaniel Hackett rolled out there against Seattle, 16 of those guys are no longer Denver Broncos. 36 total players that were on the depth chart for that season opener against Seattle, no longer on the team. I don't expect you to memorize numbers or very much care except for what this means. Because I looked at two teams that also made coaching changes the same time the Broncos did, Arizona and Indianapolis. The Broncos turned over not as much of the roster as the Cardinals have, but certainly more than the Colts. But they've turned over the starters to a greater degree than either the Cardinals or the Colts. So if this feels like a continuation of this Payton purge, that all these players, you feel like all these players that I like are gone, you're not too far off. 73% of the starters from 2 years ago are not even on the roster anymore. 68% of the roster as a whole has changed since just 2 years ago. Perhaps a necessary reminder of where the Broncos are and what they're trying to do. Like, it's about the big picture. Tim Patrick was released because he's getting in the way of Troy Franklin and Devon Vele's development. Same with Samaje Perine and Andrick Estime. You can think the Broncos are going to go over their Vegas win total. Sean Payton says they will. Not in so many words, but it's about the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is Sean Payton wants this team to be a legitimate threat to be a playoff team next year. Not this year, next year. If it was this year, Tim Patrick would still be on the roster. This is about next year, the year after, and Sean Payton building something sustainable like he did in New Orleans. That's what he's trying to do in Denver. They're not better with Troy Franklin than they were with Tim Patrick. They're not better with Brandon Jones than they were with Justin Simmons. This is not what has happened throughout most of the roster the last couple of years, is not making the Broncos better now. It's about making them better in the future. And then to sustain that success. Sean Payton has continued to terraform the Denver Broncos organization, build it up in his own image, and every day he gets a little bit closer. And a day like today, he could take a big step towards that with roster cutdown day. Let's go to story number 2.
I don't think love, when you say love, I don't think that's strong enough. Absolutely. The drive, the love, the passion to do so, certainly from the football part of it, but it's beyond that too. I mean, just how much you want to immerse yourself in helping a guy maybe have a little better time management skills, to help him develop some self-discipline that helps them do better in school, or be a little sturdier in their squadron, or be a better football player. And hopefully those are attributes they carry with them long, long beyond football too.
That is the head coach of the Air Force Falcons, Troy Calhoun, earlier today when asked how much he loves developing players in his program. If we need to find a better or bigger word than love to describe that, then we're going to need the same word to apply to this season. I think this is a season that Troy Calhoun is very excited about, because it's absolutely it will show you how good the Falcons are at developing talent, bringing guys along, so when they are called upon, they are ready to perform. That's what this roster has, because there aren't a lot of guys that you're going to recognize Saturday against Merrimack. But Air Force has been working with these guys. Troy Calhoun, Mike Thiessen, Coach Lobo, the entire coaching staff has been developing these guys. And the fruits of that labor is going to show out to a degree that I have a hard time remembering a season where the Falcons had as much turnover as this one. And I'm sure it's happened. I don't remember it for a while. It's just been kind of a couple guys here, a couple guys there, maybe a new QB, maybe a new running back. These are wholesale changes from what they were last year. But I think Troy Calhoun and his staff embrace this. This is the one thing they get to do that these other institutions don't in college football. They get to develop their guys with no fear that they're going to bail because they didn't get playing time. Today, talked to the Falcons starting center. He's a junior. He's played 3 snaps. 3 snaps. Could you imagine if you had the talent to be a starting anything in today's world of college football and you got 2 snaps? You would jump into the portal so fast. I think this is the kind of season that I think Troy Calhoun and his staff live for. To say, yeah, we got a bunch of new guys, but look at what we've done with them over the last few years. And as I go through the best and worst case scenario for the Falcons, as I did earlier on in the show, it's because of their ability to develop talent over the years that I feel like at worst, this is a 6-win team. Now, don't get me wrong. Given what Air Force has done over the last few years, 6 wins would be kind of a bummer. But it'd still get them into a bowl game. That worst case scenario also includes them not winning at West Point. So that would be, again, bummer. But 6 wins could be a ceiling for many teams. And that's how much I believe in what this coaching staff does. Now, best case scenario, CIC trophy comes home. They get a win in Laramie, and for the first time in forever, Frozen fans. And they compete in the Mount West. Maybe they don't get there. UNLV, Boise State especially. One spot in the Mount West title game is spoken for. That's Boise's. They got on lock. There's another one up for grabs. Could Air Force be in that conversation late in the season? Absolutely. And the best case scenario I see for this team, while still acknowledging that they do have lost a lot of key players, a lot of very talented players, I think this team could be, at best case scenario, a 9-win team, which would keep up the standard. And imagine doing that with how much roster turnover they've had. I'm going to settle on 7-8. More 8 than 7. That's kind of where I have this Air Force team. And I do think they bring the CIC trophy home. They're not going to let what happened last year at Empower Field happen again. Story number 3 is, and I apologize for bearing the lead. This may be the most important story, not just of the day, but of our collective times on Earth. Russell Westbrook has taken to social media to say, leave Christian alone. There was a rumor that Christian Brown wouldn't give up number 0 to Russell Westbrook. And people came out in droves on social media and said, how could he do that? This is Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook took to social to say, let's please leave our young star alone. Like I said, leave Brittany alone. CB and I never discussed him passing along the number 0. I didn't want it. Inquire about or request the number 0 because I chose to mark this new change with a new number. And he put new in quotation marks because I think he's worn 4 before. The excitement of the new season has already begun, and unfortunately, I know that means the offload of many false stories. Not today. CB and I are locked in and ready to get things rocking in the Mile High City. Signed, the Brody. And with that, the Russell Westbrook hype and the Russell Westbrook love among Nuggets fans has increased tenfold. I cannot wait, and I think it will happen in the next 48 hours, but I cannot wait till I see my next Russell Westbrook should be the starting point guard of the Denver Nuggets. It's cool for him to do that. I think it's a little bit silly that people went after Christian Brown about not giving up the number 0. But I mean, it's social media, so people get mad about just about anything. So I just want to make sure that you knew that Russell Westbrook didn't want number 0, and he's fine with Christian Brown having it. Crisis averted. And that's the only thing, right? There's nothing else going on with the Denver Nuggets right now that could potentially be dramatic. Like, nobody's entering their final season of their contract and was supposed to sign a max deal about 10 days ago and hasn't done it yet. Certainly the Nuggets don't have that going on. This truly is the most pressing thing going on with the Denver Nuggets, and add the ability to tear the team apart. So thank you, Russell Westbrook. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the 3 stories that are driving the show. Coming up next, your chance to win tickets to see Ludacris at the Colorado State Fair. And speaking of Ludacris, what's going on in Dallas? Are they paying people now? I thought they weren't going to. Four-time platinum rapper Ludacris is coming to the Colorado State Fair in Pueblo this Saturday, August 31st. See his unrivaled match of lyrical acumen, wit, and imagery. And throw them bows. I put that in there. Drop bows on them. Get your tickets, coloradostatefair.com, or from me right now. I have 2 tickets to see Luda throw them bows. If you'd like to go and see Luda, throw them bows. I was going to do a Southern hospitality thing. It's fine. 719-247-1313. 13 texter to text Ludacris and their name. We'll get 2 tickets to Saturday night's show. This is about the 786th day in a row where I have had a moment where I've wondered, what are the Cowboys doing? So on this iteration, everyone questioned Jerry Jones not paying anybody. Then he pays CeeDee Lamb, and everyone's like, why are you paying CeeDee Lamb? Let's at least give some level of credit that they needed to sign CeeDee Lamb. And I get they probably had leverage. He wasn't going to sit out the year. It's like Brandon Ayuk. Like, I understand that. But you wanted Jerry Jones to sign CeeDee Lamb. He signed CeeDee Lamb. And people are upset, what? That he had to spend more money on CeeDee Lamb? All of a sudden, people were on his side about not signing Micah Parsons, Dak Prescott, or CeeDee Lamb. So I got to say first, like, you got to make up your mind. I think it's good for the Dallas Cowboys that CeeDee Lamb was signed. And if I'm a Cowboys fan, I would shudder to think what my present and future would look like without CeeDee Lamb. Yes, Micah Parsons, also very important. And look, I could argue that Micah Parsons is more important to take care of than CeeDee Lamb, but to me, it's always been those 2 guys against Dak. In this respect, I think Jerry Jones's whole shtick here is about Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott. I don't think it's about Micah Parsons. I don't think it's really about CeeDee Lamb. I think they were trying to get those deals done. I think that this is modus operandi for the Dallas Cowboys. They wait and wait and wait, and they sign it late, and you say you didn't have to spend that much money, and they usually offset it with cash. And because Jerry Jones is the richest dude in the league, or one of them anyway, has the most valuable franchise, he can do it. That's how they massage the salary cap. They give these guys a bunch of cash. And that's why even within a salary cap structure, that there is some discrepancies between the haves and the have-nots. All these teams are not on the same level. Like, you want them to sign CeeDee Lamb and you want them to sign Micah Parsons. I think this whole thing is about Dak and about Mike McCarthy, because I believe that Jerry Jones fancies himself a young quarterback that just so happens to play in this state. I don't think he really wants to get Dion as his head coach, although he would consider it because he's Jerry Jones. Why would he not? But I think I'm not going to be the person to be like, will Dion leave? Because I don't think he's going to leave for the NFL. But I think Jerry likes Shador. And I think he's fed up to a degree by continuing to pay Dak Prescott for only regular season output. And also, I think it's about Mike McCarthy, because I think Bill Belichick is waiting in the wings for that gig. I think CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons are just getting caught up in the crossfire, so to speak, but also a little bit how the Cowboys normally do business. It's not the most efficient way to do business, but they usually seem to get it done. It's good for the Cowboys that CeeDee Lamb is there, because they're considering Dalvin Cook for the running back position. Like, they need CeeDee Lamb and they need Micah Parsons. So they should probably try to get that done. I think this is much more about McCarthy and Dak than it is Lamb and Parsons. Sending a message to those two gentlemen more than Lamb or Parsons. You'd be insane to let Lamb and Parsons go. And the problem, and I recognize the issue here with Jerry Jones. The issue is the Dallas Cowboys will not be bad enough to be in a position legitimately to draft Shedeur. I seem to remember his father saying something about, I don't know, pulling a Manning. I don't think it's the most sound thought process from Jerry Jones, but I think that's what it is. I think he'd like to start fresh at the head coach and quarterback position. But it feels erratic. It feels a little counter to what Jerry Jones has been doing. I understand that, but guess what? Welcome to Jerry Jones. Are you just getting introduced to Jerry Jones now? He's a little different. And you could say that's a good or a bad thing. That's up to you. I don't think it's great. But like Jerry Jones acting weird, doing something weird, I would never dream of such a thing. And then there's this. Jerry Jones, where was he? What was he on? I don't know, in Dallas. Oh, no, he told Clarence Hill, Cowboys writer. This is what he said. I can't do the accent, so you just got to imagine the accent. I've done it all, so I have an inordinate amount of confidence. It would be inordinate. I have an inordinate amount of confidence that and he said the word, if anybody can figure out how to get this bleat done, and he said the word, I can figure out how to get it done. I've been there every which way from Sunday, and I have busted my ass a bunch. And there's nothing living that's out cutting and shooting that can't give you a bunch of times they busted their ass. So hell no, there's nobody that could effing come in here and do all the contracts and be a GM any better than I can. Wow. Cutting and shooting. Is that drafting and signing? I'm not sure. I don't understand that parlance. Is that an Arkansas thing? Cutting and shooting. He's a little unhinged. Little bit. getting a little paranoid maybe. There's a little bit of that. Splash of that in here with all this stuff. But the bottom line is, look, at least they got CD. I know that's probably, Cowboys fans are probably like, what about signing people in the offseason to make the team better instead of just keeping what you have? I get that. Yeah. Signing CD Lamb is good. And it's a rose in the middle of a barren desert of paranoia and cursing and I don't like the vibe. I'm glad that they signed CeeDee Lamb. They needed to sign CeeDee Lamb. No matter how this shakes out, they're going to want CeeDee Lamb moving forward. But I don't know how anyone can buy into the Cowboys. And they are one of the stone cold locks to make the postseason in the NFC. I have zero doubt that they're going to make the postseason. And it's like, well, they're one of, 14 teams. They got no chance of making it to the Super Bowl. None. I can't even with this guy. And like, I try to look, I'm like, oh, it's good. They signed CeeDee Lamb. Oh, wait, there's all this stuff. And now you're going to start cursing up a storm against people who say that you shouldn't be GM anymore. Which, by the way, he shouldn't. Like, at the risk of incurring his wrath, he should not be. Should not be. We've been through this in many different sports. You want the separation of powers. You want people focused on their thing, to make the main thing, to stay in their lane, right? That was part of the downfall of Belichick in New England, right? He didn't just coach the team. That was part of his downfall. We want that separation of responsibilities. Now, to be fair, of someone who does more than he probably should, Jerry Jones's teams historically have fared much better than some of these other teams across sports. But it's not the preferred way to go. Hopefully you didn't hear that. I don't want to be cursed at. But I would like to know what cutting and what was the other thing he said? Cutting and shooting. Don't know what that means. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, if you think the Denver Broncos keeping 3 quarterbacks is wild, boy, do I have a story for you out of Ohio. 2 is usually enough. In fact, NFL rules up until very recently would only allow you to have 2 quarterbacks. But at least they don't have 4. Final cut downs for the Cleveland Browns today, much like the Denver Broncos, and the Cleveland Browns don't have 1 quarterback. They don't have 2 quarterbacks, not 3 quarterbacks, 4 quarterbacks. Deshaun Watson, Jameis Winston, Dorian Thompson Robinson, who the Broncos saw last year, and Tyler Huntley, formerly of the Baltimore Ravens. When asked why, Kevin Stefanski, why would you carry 4 quarterbacks, leaving only 49 other positions on your roster? He said, quote, "We have 4 good quarterbacks." No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't have 4 good quarterbacks. In fact, you know how I know you don't have 4 good quarterbacks? Because if only one of those quarterbacks was good, you would not feel the need to have 3 other ones on the roster. If Deshaun Watson was everything that you guys hoped and dreamed he would be when you went against everyone's advice and traded for him, you would not be carrying 4 quarterbacks. And yes, I know that it was a bit of a revolving door of quarterbacks in Cleveland last year. I don't think this is doomsday prepping on the part of Kevin Stefanski in terms of injury. I don't think that's what this is about. This is about, I got to have options if Deshaun Watson is what he's looking to be. Got to have some options. It's not good. It's not a good thing. Doesn't speak well of the situation in Cleveland. If Deshaun Watson was right, if Deshaun Watson had shown anything, a sliver, a glimmer that he is the quarterback he was in Houston, this would not be the case. He has done little to nothing on the field to show that. And now he's battled with the sore arm. Very serious condition. The sore arm that he has been battling. And he, quite frankly, he's been losing. He's been losing that battle. He was supposed to play this past weekend. Kevin Stefanski said all of his starters would play. Guess who didn't? His most high-profile starter. Now, the Cleveland Browns should not be mentioned in the same breath as the Dallas Cowboys because they have done many, many, many things that make sense, that are good. They just did the one bad thing. But that one bad thing is kind of leading me in the same direction as I'm going down with the Cowboys. I know they're talented. I know they're a good team. I can't buy into them. I can't do it. You're going to carry 4 quarterbacks. What's that old saying? If you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. What does it say if you carry 4 quarterbacks? Is Tyler Huntley your Zach Wilson? I think Tyler Huntley was just fine as a backup to Lamar Jackson. He's not Lamar Jackson. But these aren't broken quarterbacks except for the one. Right? Tyler Huntley's not a reclamation project. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is not a reclamation project. Their reclamation project is their starter. It's Deshaun Watson. And this, to me, says they are very worried about Deshaun Watson. Very worried. If you thought Sean Payton going out and spending above market value to bring in Jared Stidham as Russell Wilson's backup was a little alarm, a little sign that Sean Payton was very ready to move on from Russell Wilson, or at least very didn't have high hopes for him to go out and spend that kind of money on a backup quarterback, what do you think carrying 3 other quarterbacks on the roster means about Deshaun Watson? I love so much about the Cleveland Browns. Their roster is stacked. I think Kevin Stefanski is a great coach. And I think they've done so much right, except the one thing. And it's that one thing that's kind of ruining everything else. And I'm not even talking about what happened in Houston and why people said it was a bad idea that they brought in Deshaun Watson. I don't have to add that. I'm just talking about the football. Look at the guy as a football player. Follow his Browns career, his illustrious Browns career. That's the problem now. It's not good. Not a good situation. I don't have the time to get into this. I'll get into it tomorrow, though. The headline coming from the Broncos social media. George Payton believes Denver's initial 53-man roster gives Broncos best chance to win. I call BS. And I can make my argument in one player. Tim Patrick. This is not the best roster to give you the best chance to win. No, it's not. I just got done for the last about 3 hours saying it's not about this year. It's about the future and why that's good, why that is necessary. Cutting Tim Patrick and to a degree, Samaje Perine. I mean, you like what you see from Audric Estime, but you don't know. You know what you could get with Samaje Perine. Right now, the best case scenario for Audric Estime his rookie year is that he be Samaje Perine. If only the Broncos had Samaje Perine. It's about the future. It's about getting the young players on the field. Poor George Payton. Look what he's been relegated to. Lying to people. Lying to their faces. This doesn't give Denver the best chance to win this roster. I can argue it in one player. You made one roster decision that just destroys your entire statement. This isn't the best 53. In fact, did Sean Payton say best 53? Think back. When he talked about what this training camp and preseason was about, did he say, I'm looking to find the best 53-man roster? No, he did not. He said the right 53. There's a difference. This is the right 53. I agree with him. For what it's worth, I agree. Of who the Broncos had in camp, this is the right 53. Maybe not Zach Wilson, but for the most, but it wasn't like they had another quarterback. I said this about Zach Wilson. Like, I'm not, who's the guy other than Tim Patrick that got cut that you would rather have on this roster than Zach Wilson? But it was about the right 53. The right 53, not the best. So saying this gives you the best chance to win is being quite disingenuous. Because it's not. Right 53. Most of them are the best. 49, 50 are the best. Broncos took the best punter. I know that. Riley Dixon made more money. They could have saved money with Trent Gill. Nope. They said Riley Dixon. Punter. Important position for a team like the Denver Broncos. They chose the best punter of the two. They didn't do that at every position. But that's what you're going to get, right? I'm not surprised by it. Not even disappointed. I'm just saying, like, that's not true. This is not the best 53 to give you the best chance to win. It's not. Or how about you tag on 2025 and beyond? Like, do that. Add that. And then that would make your statement more true. Best chance to win. Win now, win later. Leads people to think it's win now. That's why he's being disingenuous. Best chance to win in 2025 and beyond. I'll buy that. I'll buy that. George Payton just telling half truths. Here's all truth. If you're dealing with pain from arthritis, you know, you could tell me how awful it is, right? And how it's robbed you of all the things that you love to do. Well, I'm here to tell you that there are effective ways to deal with that pain, and I'm not talking about drugs or surgery. I'm talking about QC Kinetics. There are exciting new cellular therapies that can get you lasting relief. QC Kinetics uses cutting-edge treatments that accelerate your own body's healing properties, revitalizing your joints so you can move again. Learn how QC Kinetics can use advanced regenerative medicine to treat the pain, enhance your joints, restore your mobility, and give you long-term relief. Long-term relief. Not short-term relief, long-term relief. Like Denver. Long-term vision. You want to be good in the long term. You want to be good in the long term. And you also be better in the short term as well, because QC Kinetics comes with no downtime. Call for a free consultation now. 719-347-1988. 719-347-1988. Off Research Parkway on Chapel Hills Drive, and with locations in Aurora, Superior, and Highlands Ranch. It has been my distinct honor and pleasure to serve you on this Tuesday. I very much look forward to doing it again tomorrow at 3 right here on Extra Sports 1300. Oh, by the way, congratulations to Charles. Charles is our ludicrous winner for the day. Don't worry, more Luda tickets, more Air Force football tickets, more Switchbacks tickets tomorrow. So tune in for that, if nothing else. Have a good night.